Hi everyone, I'm Marcus. I work at DevRel at Editing Node building the graph. And today we have two guests. We have Not Your Handle and Livia, who are going to be going through and uh, presenting on how they are building with the graph. Now, this is a little bit different in terms of a graph builder's office hours. We're trying to expand reach to around the world with the graph, and that's a really important part of building on the graph. This is an international protocol. And with that being said, we need to be able to support languages from around the world. So Livia here will be translating Not Your Handle's presentation as he goes along and making sure that the Spanish-speaking audience is able to consume this information and build well. So thank you so much for being here, guys. Before we get into you, and I'll hand the mic over to you guys, what I want to do is do a quick announcement for the builders here. I want to share my screen and just share this bit of information. Graph Builder's newsletter for last month, we have Graph Node 0.35.1 out, and there's some really cool features with this. So if you haven't gone onto this just yet, go to the blog, check out last month's newsletter, and there's now declarative ETH calls, which make ETH calls much more performant, which has been a real hang up for a lot of developers for a while. Anyone using ETH calls can really slow things down. And now we have an ability to speed things up a little bit with them. Still, they're not ideal, but this is a good middle ground. This is another great feature of 0.35.1 has code. If you put an address into this method right here, we will be able to determine if it is an EOA or if it is a actual smart contract. And so you can see this example code. Go ahead and get playing with that. That'll be done in the mappings, really cool. And then finally, there's precise filtering with indexed argument filters, also known as topic filters. So we could really get into filtering even more accurately in our code. So go ahead and check out those three new updates with 0.35.1. All of those are available in the Graph Studio, Graph Studio. So go ahead and start playing with that, and you'll soon start to see that on the Graph network as it rolls out to the indexers around the world. So that is it for the announcements. With that all being said, I'm going to pass the mic over to Not Your Handle and Livia, and I wish you guys the very best. If you can guys give a little background about yourselves as well as what the workshop will be on today, I'll go ahead and let you take it from there. So go for it, guys.
Bueno, quería comentar un poco cómo conocí a Notur. La semana pasada tuve la oportunidad de estar en Edge Esmeral y Notur era el organizador de una hacker house enfocada en gobernanza, pero enfocada a cómo repensar la gobernanza para el futuro y cómo basarla en la predicción de mercados. Y bueno, y ahora me gustaría que Notur se introduzca. Please, Notur, can you introduce yourself, please?
Of course. Hello, everybody. I'm Not Your Handle. My actual name is Vaughan, like Sean, but with a V. And I'm here today after meeting Livia last week in Edge Esmeralda. We were giving a presentation and running a hacker house on governance and mechanism design. So this is using mechanisms instead of simple voting to make decisions in protocols and DAOs. And one of the most important parts of the week and of the presentations was an idea called Futaki, which we can explain today. It's fairly famous, been around for the last 10, 15 years, and now is starting to see some limelight with some real running implementations. So it's quite exciting. Hopefully I can shed some light on kind of a framework for thinking about how to govern protocols in the future.
Bueno, now I would like to introduce myself. I'm Livia. I'm a contributor for the Graph DAO, just like more than 8 months. I'm continue learning about the technology and about the blockchain. And at the end of the presentation, I will show you one app that we can co-create with, we can use with the graph.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for introducing yourself, guys. And so, Not Your Handle, let's go ahead and go into what you'll be showing today, if you wouldn't mind going through and sharing. There we go. Go for it there.
All right. So I won't take very long to do this. It should take maybe 10 minutes. But basically, what we presented, this was the presentation we presented last week, Livia saw. And what we wanted to present is a way of thinking about why governance is a hard problem in blockchain protocols. And we call it alignment games. And the basic idea is that when you think about governance, so let's say that we give everybody who's contributing to a protocol a token, and we allow them to use those tokens to vote. Then if you think about what we're trying to do, is we're trying to make sure that whenever there's an update to a protocol, as we heard some updates to the Graph protocol, that whoever's making those updates is aligned with the goals of everybody who's exposed to the protocol. So if you want to make an update, you're going to have to hold tokens. And if you made a update that was maybe an attack or was likely to reduce the value of the protocol, you would also lose some value because you hold the tokens in order to make the vote. So that's the basic idea. And so we call these games alignment games. And if you think about them as alignment games, you can start to reason about plenty of other ways of kind of performing this job.
Sí, básicamente es como que el problema de la gobernanza hoy en día es que solamente nos basamos en nuestros, no nos basamos en datos que ya tenemos y que queremos, o sea, y que junto con Furtachi y este proyecto lo que está haciendo es tener una mirada diferente en base a la información que ya está on-chain y cómo pueden utilizar esto para poder incrementar y como para poder dar más valor a las decisiones que se tomen en los proyectos.
Okay. This is just a quote that we like to reference, which is a good way of thinking about blockchain protocols, any protocol. And you can think about the graph in the same way. The idea is it's designed so that it makes it profitable for anybody, i.e. the wrong people, to do the right thing. And so if the graph has been designed to do one job, you want to make sure that anybody who interacts with it, it's always in their interest, it's profitable for them to do things that are valuable for all the other users of the graph, and not do bad things like attack the graph or try to inject a malicious data or malicious code, which could then ruin the system for other people. So a few definitions, which I think are going to be useful. So when we talk about protocol governance, what do we mean? So you can think about a protocol as just a set of rules, and the rules specify how anybody in a network can interact. And what's really useful about this is, let's say you use the graph. There are certain things you can do with the graph because they're specified in the code that's been deployed to a blockchain. There are lots of actions that you might want to take, but you can't because they don't exist in the protocol. And so what's really good about this is that you can predict what other people will do. And so if you can predict what other people will do, then you lower the transaction costs of actually interacting with other people. This is super useful. And this is why we have things like markets, why we have things like schools and other institutions. They help to reduce the transaction costs. It's why we have things like contracts. Protocols, especially blockchain protocols, extend that. They allow us to do more things.
Ya, primero queremos saber qué es gobernanza, qué es el protocolo de gobernanza. Usualmente existe ya una predicción para saber cuándo los mercados suben y bajan, y en ese momento también las cadenas pueden ajustar sus costos si ellos predicen de que tal persona va a vender, que cierto grupo de personas va a vender va a vender el token o etcétera. Y esto es algo que ya sucede, solamente que nosotros desde nuestro lado no lo podemos ver. Go Notur.
So here's a diagram that explains how good way of thinking about it. So you can think about the graph being a set of functions that anybody can call. And then you can think about the governance as being the code that allows you to update these functions. So that's a good way of thinking about a protocol. It's just this set of rules of things you can do, and then some governance is just what allows you to update those rules. So nice and simple.
Sí, hay que pensar cómo la gobernanza va a hacer un reseteo o una actualización de las funciones que se van creando dentro del protocolo.
And here's just some examples of Uniswap. So this is the function of Uniswap. This is the add liquidity function. So if you want to put some money into Uniswap, you just give it 2 tokens and the amount that you're going to actually put in there. And then here is the swap function. So if you want to make a swap, you give it these arguments, and then you can swap. And the idea here is to really think about protocols as just being these 2 things. They're just sets of functions that you can always predict every person using the protocol has to call. So you can predict their actions.
Claro, podemos ver cómo el código de Uniswap está en la parte de arriba y también cómo abajo ellos pueden predecir esta información.
And then so the governance is just the rules that allow you to update the rules. So, hey, I want to change the way that Uniswap does the swap function. We need rules to make sure I can't do something crazy and break the swap function. And so there's 4 things that really you want to try and specify. So how to update the protocol, how to update parameters of the protocol, such as the fee switch in Uniswap, how to upgrade the policies. So these are processes that aren't necessarily on chain, like how do we do deployments? And then how do we allocate the treasury? How do we allocate the resources of the protocol?
Claro, aquí estamos dando, o sea, vemos 4 niveles y vemos que todo esto también va dirigido por el protocolo de gobierno, cómo esto se va a... can you repeat the last sentence, please?
Yeah, so the last one is how governance will allocate the resources of the protocol. So, for example, the treasury.
Ya, perfecto. ¿Cómo la gobernanza va a decidir los parámetros que se necesitan, ¿no? Para crear un buen gobierno, como por ejemplo la tesorería, ¿no? ¿Cómo se define eso en base a una predicción del mercado, en base a la data, ¿no? Que tenemos anteriormente de años pasados o de cómo han distribuido, incluso podrían, no sé, no estoy muy segura de esto, pero sí que podrían ver otros protocolos o otras cadenas como lo han hecho, ¿no? Por ejemplo, I just trying to say that if it is possible, try to understand one blockchain before do a new setup for other governance or other blockchain or other project.
Yeah, I mean, I think all we're trying to say here is there's a framework for thinking about the role of protocol governance and what it needs to accomplish. So you can accomplish all of this with token voting. You can have a set of tokens, and token holders can vote, and their votes will be weighted by how many tokens they hold, and they can make all 4 of these decisions.
Ok, entonces esto es como que van a poder decidir en base a los votos, en base a los distintos parámetros, ¿no? Que incluso podemos ver en esas diapositivas. Si a alguien no le quedó claro, puede interrumpir, por favor. Luis.
And here's just an example of the code. Sorry, go on. So here's just an example of code of the governance proposal. And I was just showing you that if you look through the code, you can see that there are, in the code, it actually says, here's the rule. If the for votes are less than or equal to the against votes, or the for votes are less than the quorum, so like a minimum threshold of votes you need to pass a proposal, then basically say that the proposal is defeated or else make it succeed. So this is the rule that's actually allowing governance of protocols to work. So this is all just specified in the code.
Oh, ok. Aquí nos está mostrando Notur el código de cómo se va a ir ajustando, cómo él ha hecho este código para identificar si la propuesta es válida o no es válida o cómo toman decisiones, ¿no? En base a información.
So just a couple of ideas here. Why do we need good governance? We can govern things quite simply. We can have a company and the company makes the decisions, or we can have this completely decentralized network make decisions, but we do need it. And a great example here is a vending machine, which is an old one. It's in Tokyo somewhere. And you can see that one of the main problems you have with vending machines is you need someone to change the products inside it. Otherwise, people won't use it anymore because their tastes may change, for example.
Aquí tenemos un ejemplo de una vending machine y esta vending machine nos explica, ¿no? que si el producto que sale por esa máquina no es el que queremos, simplemente ya no lo vamos a consumir, ¿no? Por eso es importante adaptarse a las nuevas tendencias y a los nuevos networks de mercados de protocolos emergentes.
And then there's a bit of a tension here because and every protocol is different, but what users want is they want a predictable space. They want to know that anybody they interact with will always only be able to take the actions in the protocol. But also we need the set of actions to change over time as we need to do new things. So how do we agree, right?
Claro. ¿Por qué deberíamos estar de acuerdo, ¿no? En tener un mercado predecible si todos los protocolos son diferentes?
And so really we want to have protocols that are predictable, and we want governance mechanisms that make the protocol change in predictable ways.
Lo que queremos lograr es que los protocolos, poder tener el valor del protocolo en función a la predicción y a una gobernanza de mecanismo. Esa es la propuesta.
And so here's a reason for decentralized governance. So not necessarily that we just want governance, maybe with one company or one designer or one developer, but maybe we want to decentralize it because if we don't, then you may have problems like this where centralized governance, or at least singular governance, there are good, strong incentives to change the rules at any point in time. And so this is an example where a developer just stole all the money, for example. So it's an extreme example.
Claro, aquí podemos ver un ejemplo de cómo en base a esta especulación, ¿no? Del token, etcétera, los diferentes incentivos, alguien decide robar el token y es un ejemplo extraño, es un ejemplo extremo, pero esto ha pasado, ¿no? En sí, ¿no? Con diferentes proyectos.
And then just to give some examples, a good way of thinking about governance mechanisms is similar to consensus mechanisms. So consensus mechanisms are there to help everyone in the network come to consensus on the order of the information or the state of the information in the network. So you have transactions, which is potential new information, and then you have this consensus mechanism like proof of work or proof of stake or delegated proof of stake. And then you have state update. So when we update the state, we come to some consensus. And similar with governance mechanisms, they are taking contributions, things that people want to add or want to change. We run them through something like token voting or like a technocracy, which is just the kind of like the improvement proposal process in Ethereum, for example, or futarchy, which is governance by prediction markets. And then eventually you make a decision and you have protocol updates.
Ya, bueno, aquí podemos ver cómo los mecanismos de gobernanza se comparan con el mecanismo de consenso. En cuanto al mecanismo de consenso, tenemos Proof of Work, Proof of Stake, y en cuanto a gobernanza, estamos proponiendo también, bueno, se está proponiendo token de votación, esta terminología nueva que es furtachi y también tecnocracia, ¿no? Y entonces él está haciendo acá como una analogía, ¿no? De cómo poder encontrar otras métricas diferentes.
So I just wanted to quickly go to the futarchy point, which is to say, so we have a framework for thinking about governance, which we call alignment games. And so we say, if we have an objective for the protocol, we want to take any contribution and evaluate it to determine whether it's aligned. So, if it's not aligned and it's something that's going to harm the protocol, it's -1. If it is aligned and it's something that's going to create value for the protocol, it's +1. And this is just a way of thinking about the job that we're trying to solve in governance.
Ya, este framework es cómo podríamos resolver esto en la gobernanza. La teoría de juegos.
So finally, I just wanted to introduce one of the mechanisms, which is called futarchy. It's fairly famous. His author is called Robin Hanson. He wrote the paper in 2000, so it's 24 years old, and hasn't changed much since then. But now we have some implementations thanks to blockchain. And the idea is simple. You vote on an objective. So what do we think measures our values? So for example, for Uniswap, it could be order flow. For I'm trying to think of another protocol. For a country, it could be GDP. And then you have people bet on what they believe will happen if a particular contribution is made or a particular change is made. So if we change this particular function or this particular rule, do we think that GDP will go up or down? Do we think that more people will use Uniswap or less people? Do you think people will store more things on the graph or less? Do you think people will build more indexes on the graph or less? And then if whichever proposal, whenever this goes through a prediction market, we have two markets. One is the price if the proposal passes. One is the price if the proposal fails. And we run them. And then at the end, we take the one that's higher, basically, and then we get rid of the other one, and then we execute the proposal, or we fail the proposal. And that's the idea. And the theory says that these things will work really well, and they'll produce better outcomes than voting. So it's a really exciting field to study, and that's where we've been working.
Ya, bueno, aquí hubieron muchas cosas, pero esta es una corriente que se viene investigando desde el año 2000. Ya han pasado 24 años y el objetivo básicamente es poder tomar las decisiones del pasado y analizarlas en el futuro y ver qué falló, ¿no? Can you repeat the last part for what is the main idea?
So the main idea is, of course. So the main idea is you have a proposal. You have a proposal which you're going to add. So let's say you have the graph protocol version 1, and then you want to add, you want to change the graph to the graph version 2. And so you would run two prediction markets where in one you say, what do you think the price, if we pass this proposal, so if we move to version 2, will the graph be more valuable or less valuable? And then you just have people bet on which one they think is going to happen. And if more people bet on it being more valuable, then we pass the proposal.
Ya. De nuevo, ¿no? Tenemos el token de The Graph en dos mercados y vamos a tener algo que las personas nos digan, este es más valioso, este este no es tanto, y en cuanto a eso, y en cuanto a analizar qué falló bien y qué pasó, qué fue lo positivo y lo negativo, em, cómo podemos, cuál podemos definir como verdadero, ¿no? ¿Cuál podemos dar como efectivo?
So that's it. That's the idea of Futarchy, and that's what we're trying to implement in crypto. We hope that the future is lots of protocols where lots of their decisions are made via these prediction markets, or what we call mechanisms.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Not Your Handle and Livia. What I'd like to do is, Not Your Handle, are there any links that you'd like to share for the viewers right now to take a look at what you're working on? Is there anything that you'd like to share for the builders here? We got a lot of developers in the audience. Just curious if there's anything that comes to mind that you'd like them to take a look at. And also, with that being said, once you're looking that up, I have some questions for you concerning whales. That's actually funny enough how I got introduced to crypto. Was I was working with a soul-bound token startup, and they really got into me understanding whales better. What are your thoughts on whales, and have you seen a governance system that does a good job accommodating for certain token holders that have, 10,000x of what everyone else has?
Absolutely. So the standard approach, or the approach that's been favored in crypto so far, is to use a form of quadratic voting or funding, which is where you take the square root of someone's token. So let's say you have like 100 tokens, then we take the square root of that. If you have like 9 tokens, we take the square root of that. And so someone who has 100 tokens would be 10, and someone who has 9 tokens would end up being 3. And so you see that the distance is being shrunk between them. And this is really useful. The problem is that people can split their 100 tokens between a ton of different accounts, and in the end up with overall like the same amount of votes. So it tends not to be very Sybil resistant, and then you have to spend a lot of time making it Sybil resistant, or lots of effort. So I would say that our approach is to use markets, and the problem, the whale problem is still there. So very, very wealthy people can manipulate the market. But if you manipulate the market, it also creates a good incentive for people to bet against you if they believe that the outcome is going to be, if they believe you're wrong, basically, you are manipulating the market. So I think it's not necessarily it's basically resolved by the market in the way that all markets have people trying to manipulate them and people betting against them. So I think that's the only difference we have in Futarchy, is that we don't have proof of how these markets will behave just yet. So that's what we're trying to do, is try and generate some proof.
Está súper interesante el valor de poder ver qué cosa está trabajando hoy en día las personas que están en gobernanza en un alto nivel. Es muy importante para nosotros porque usualmente este tipo de información no llega a Latinoamérica y tampoco traducido a español. Entonces, creo que también van a poder darse oportunidades para poder crear DAO tools, y creo que también es un tema en el que puede servirles como incentivos para seguir investigando y buscar a Nothur, ¿no? En cuanto a conocer más sobre cómo la predicción de mercados está fluyendo en la gobernanza, o qué herramientas se pueden crear para eso, ¿no? Sobre todo nosotros que manejamos toda esta parte teórica toda esta parte teórica, ¿no? De cómo trabajar con estos proyectos analizando los protocolos de graph.
I have one final question with this. I'm curious that you're very much in the governance aspect of things, and you're looking at ways to improve governance. When you see a protocol out there that raises alarm bells, you're like, oh, okay, that's not good. And then compare that, if you could, to another, don't have to give names, of course, but like, what are some fundamentals, I suppose? What are some fundamentals that you look at when you see governance that you're like, that's a problem? And just one or two, three things that you're like, that's not great. And then others that are more like, that make you feel like these people know what they're doing.
Livia, would you like to translate the question before I answer it?
Ya, sí. ¿Cómo ves tú que esto puede cambiar la gobernanza? O sea, tú ya tienes mucho tiempo en la gobernanza. ¿Cuáles serían esos tres topics principales para que en los que enfocarías la gobernanza? Mercados.
So I think there's, without naming names, I think that there are governance designs that try to limit capture. So we have this word called capture, and some that don't. And capture is if I have some goal that is not important to the protocol itself, and I can extract resources to pay myself, basically. It can be profitable for me to do things that aren't in the interest of the protocol. That's a huge red flag. And some protocols, it's a lot easier to do than others. And I can give some examples, but maybe you want to just translate that part first, Livia.
I didn't understand about the CAPTCHA.
Yeah. So I can try and explain it another way. So capture is so it comes from political capture, which is I can have my own interests, and I can use my political power to make the political system help me, even though it doesn't help all the other people it represents.
Ya, ok. Usualmente como funciona esto es que yo tengo mis propios intereses y yo voy a usar el gobierno, la utilidad, etcétera, para poder resolver lo que yo necesito y no lo que toda la población necesita.
So my answer would be that, or kind of some examples would be, anytime you see large pools of money leaving treasuries, and you can't draw a clear line from whoever's receiving it to whatever creates value for the protocol, there's a good chance that there was some capture there. So someone was able to subvert the system to extract some money without it really being of any use. I actually put an example in the this is not necessarily an example of capture, but recently there was a proposal that went through Arbitrum to move about $250 million, I think it's $212 million, to a team who were working on a gaming accelerator. And it drew a lot of criticism because people couldn't draw that clear line from what Arbitrum stands for and this accelerator. And the team were also criticized because they were taking a $25 million admin fee for running the accelerator. So it's stuff like that. But all of these systems have holes. They're not perfect. But yeah, that's an example of one. I can actually send a link. It's in the deck.
Yeah. Sí, exactamente. Hace poco se lanzó la noticia de un gran fondo de Arbitrum para el área de gaming, y yo he podido también ver la gobernanza y ver cómo todo el mundo comienza a decir yo, mi proyecto y etcétera. Entonces, es un pequeño grupo de personas y no toda la DAO la que está organizando toda la tesorería y todo esto, ¿no? Y todos estos estos elementos que se necesitan para que esa gran piscina de dinero, ese gran liquidity pool, ¿no? Pueda ser organizado y que pueda llegar a las personas que realmente están haciendo los proyectos. Es por eso, ¿no? Es por eso que se habla de tener unos mecanismos de gobernanzas basados en data y basados en Furtachi, ¿no? Que es lo que nos ha explicado Notur hoy día, ¿no?
Someone asked about ZK Sync. I can quickly
Yeah, I
answer
see that question. Yeah, there's a question. Any thoughts on the ZK Sync recent thing, in quotes?
All I can say about it is that they've implemented something that I think works fairly well, depending on how it's set up, which is this like multi-cameral, which just means there are chambers of governance with different incentives. So they tend to act as, you probably hear this word a lot, like checks and balances. So if you have a group who makes some decisions and another group makes other decisions, and they can kind of be balanced out against each other, it tends to make the governance system sometimes fairer or more balanced because people have representation. Sometimes it slows things down, but that basic idea is a good idea. You see this in Lido with the dual governance, and you see this in Optimism with the token house as well, token house and citizen house. So yeah, I think it's a viable approach. I have no opinion on whether it's good for them because it's fairly new, but it's good.
Bueno, podemos ver que este mecanismo de gobernanza está en CK5 como dos grupos de personas que toman decisiones. En el caso de Optimism, unos son personas del City Hall y otros son delegadores, y podemos ver cómo hay un balance de poderes en eso, ¿no? ¿Piensa hacer lo mismo en CK Sync? Esa es mi pregunta. This is happening now in CK Sync. It will be the same governance like Optimism?
It's similar. They have it's actually a lot more like but yeah, it's maybe more like Arbitrum, but they have this set of guardians, so 5 elected people, and their job is to basically make sure nothing crazy happens. And then they have a security council, which I think is elected, and then they have normal token holders as well. So you just want to make sure that each of the different groups that will have representation in governance, and that's how ZK Sync are doing it. They're adding these 3 groups.
Ok, probablemente CK Sync funcione con 3 grupos, como un token house, como un city hall, como algo más que también están tratando de realizar por ahí. Someone have other question for Luis? It's a Pinac.
I was seeing Luis ping a question here potentially. Well, I'm through with questions. I feel like I've learned a lot, and I've always been interested in communities and how they come to agreements and how they can do so, and seeing how they can improve. That's always been something that I've been curious about ever since I got introduced to the concept of soulbound tokens, token voting, governance, all of that. And my path has been into the developer relations role, but I do have a very soft spot, deep soft spot for governance. So, well, I just want to thank you two today for your time, for coming on Graph Builder's office hours. And thank you, Livia, for translating. It was super helpful. I hope that this is helpful for developers who are trying to learn about governance and trying to understand a little bit more about the graph and Butter and governance as a whole. So with that being said, I'll let the last few seconds go to Not Your Handle, as well as Livia. If you have anything you want to say, I'll let you guys close this out.
¿Sí?
Sí, yo quiero decir de que Sé que este tema no ha sido tan fácil, es un tema un poco complicado, pero creo que también desde Latinoamérica o desde las personas hispanohablantes debemos de preocuparnos por entender estos nuevos temas que nos puedan dar nuevas visiones y aprender sobre cómo crear nuevos productos en cuanto al ecosistema de Graph o en sí, en cuanto al ecosistema de solucionar problemas reales, ¿no? Y este es un gran problema real. Pasa con todas esas piscinas de dinero que se dan en los protocolos y que de repente nosotros solo seguimos una moda de hacer airdrops o de participar de los fondos, pero no sabemos qué más ocurre o cuál es la realidad que hay atrás. Entonces, es importante conocer estos temas y si es posible, tratar de crear productos, ¿no? Y de hecho, creo que es un gran reto. Y también quiero compartir con ustedes, les voy a dejar el link de Data Stacks. Es un link, es un proyecto que vi también esta semana por aquí en San Francisco y básicamente es que en un futuro vamos a poder poner una API de The Graph y va a poder convertirse en un chatbot, ¿no? Y va a poder dar la data. Pregunté a Yanif como si funcionaría o no y me dijo que sí, en 3 meses podría ser consumible. Ahorita les dejo el link. Y ahora le doy el pase a Nortur. Nortur, go.
Hey, I just wanted to say thanks for having me. It was great to get an opportunity to speak to the community. Yeah, I mean, having been familiar with the graph for a very long time, it's lovely to actually be able to contribute in a small way. And hopefully the graph will be a user of Futaki sometime in the future. We shall see. But yeah, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out. We're happy to talk governance or indeed just anything to do with protocol design. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on, you guys, and looking forward to seeing you all next week for the Graph Builders office hours on July 4th. And have a good rest of your day. Take care, everyone.